Good morning to everybody. We are going to continue with the description of the chemical synthesis methods, and in this case I'm going to try to give you an overview of the Sol-Gel synthesis method, emphasizing in the particular aspects related with the synthesis of nanocomposites. I have divided this course in 4 main parts. I will start with a general introduction. As the Sol-Gel process is a synthesis process based on the reaction of precursors in solutions, I will describe briefly the main family of precursors used, as well as the reaction that takes place in solutions. After that, I will describe each Sol-Gel process stage, for finishing with a collection of real application of this process. When somebody thinks in Sol-Gel processing, probably he's thinking a relatively novel processing method, but the fact is that the first gel was obtained by Ebelman and Graham at 1850. Progressively, they were obtained the different gels, but at this time without knowing really which was the kinetic and the structural transformation that was taking place. Probably because of that, for example, the first boron gel was not obtained until 1984. At the beginning, the motivation for obtaining these gels was more from a scientific point of view than from a technological point of view. But as soon as a very interesting product, such as powders with very high purity, or with electronic or ionic conduction or magnetic materials were obtained, the real interest in technological application was found. During the last years, the main developments were the use of surfactants for control the porosity of these products, and the development of the hybrid organic and organic materials. I will start with general definitions. For example, when we talk about Sol, this is defined as a stable suspension of colloidal solid particles within a liquid. These particles must be small enough to make that the repulsion forces are stronger than the attractive ones in order to maintain a stable suspension. And this particle will be formed with between 1,000 and 1,000 million atoms per particle. If not, we are talking about molecules in solutions. Depending on the solvent, these particles that can be obtained in pure water, in aqueous solution, or in alcohol media. And they can be considered macromolecules as real colloids, for example, in the case of proteins, or subdivided in parts of a bulk matter, as is the case of the small particles of alumina. Concerning gel, it is defined as a porous three-dimensional interconnected solid network in a liquid medium, and its growth is only limited by the container. If the macromolecules are real colloids, we are talking about a colloidal gel, and if it is a subcolloidal chemical unit, we are talking about a polymeric gel. And depending on the solvent used, we can divide in hydrogel or alcohol gel. And depending on the drying method, we talk about Ser-Gel if it is a conventional heating for drying, or aerogel if it is a supercritical method. There are several definitions for the Sol-Gel processing. For example, sometimes its definition is related with the product that is going to be obtained. And for example, is defined as the method for prepared multi-component oxides homogeneous at the atomic level. Sometimes the definition gives more importance to the precursors that are used, and is only considered a Sol-Gel process if the alkoxides precursors are used. Or if in other times is for the production of inorganic oxides. But from my point of view, the most general definition for the Sol-Gel process is a colloidal route used to synthesize ceramics in this case, with an intermediate stage, including a sol or a gel state. In this diagram, I want to show the global complexity of this synthesis method. For example, at the beginning, it's necessary to control the chemical reactivity of all the precursors in the solution, taking account kinetic conditions and the colloidal suspension stability. When the gel is formed, it's necessary to control the conditions for the polymerization. And once the product was formed, it's necessary to consider also that it's going to be submitted to conventional processing techniques. And the success in the obtention of a good product is good only if all these etaps are controlled. Concerning the general applications for this method, it's very useful for coatings, for example, for anti-reflective coatings or for optical or infrared absorbing, for give electrical conductivity, or for resistance against oxidation or erosion. It's used also for the development of new ceramic fibers or composite materials, and probably the closest of the project NanoCare for the obtaining of advanced fine-grained ceramics. It's also used in the glasses and glass ceramic technologies, and recently in the obtention of ordered pore structure by using micelles, and in the obtention of hybrid inorganic materials. The main advantages of using salt gel method is principally the purity, because it's the only way to obtain really completely pure materials. And this purity could be even improved by using precursors purification. And as the subsequent temperatures for processing these materials are relatively low, it's avoided the container interactions. As it's a solid colloidal state, but it's using a liquid medium, the product is free from dust. Another possibility is the control in the kinetic of the reactivity of the precursors by controlling the temperature and the dilution. The control on the nucleation and growth of the particles allows the obtention of particles with shape and size controlled and with the suitable size distributions. Concerning glass processing, salt gel method is a solution for high fluidity problems or for the miscibility gaps in determined compositions. And the characteristic of the salt gel itself is that it allows the obtention of mixed oxide systems at atomic scale. Concerning the limitations, the most important limitations is the cost, because the precursors are relatively expensive, and it's a process that is relatively long in comparing with traditional processing methods. And in the final obtention of the dry product, there is a risk of stress cracking. I will start to describe the main family of precursors. The solvents used are the principal precursor transformation that takes place in solution. And finally, I will describe the particular case of the silicates. When we talk of the salt gel process, briefly can be described as a precursor solution that, after chemical transformations, gives place to the formation of the colloidal particle dispersion before the gel formation. There are two main families of precursors that are the metallic salts and the alkosides. But for example, in the case of we want to prepare a non-oxiding material, obviously it's necessary to use a precursor in which there is a direct bond between the metal and one, for example, carbon radical. They can also be used precursors as powder that were obtained by thermal decomposition of salts or by grinding wood material when there is not possible to obtain these precursors from precursors in solution. Concerning the solvents, they can classify in polar or non-polar, or protic or non-protic, depending on its intrinsic properties or its acidic conditions. But normally they are always used water or primary alcohols. The advantage of using organic solvents is that they permit to control the reactivity of the alkosides with the water that is added at the end of the process, and it could affect also the structure of the salt gel product. Some more definition before to start to describe the reactions. For example, in a metallic center, the coordination number is the number of electron pairs accepted by a central atom, generally a transition element. The ligands is the atom, ion, or molecule that bonds to a central metal, and they can be classified in monodentate or polydentate, depending on the number of bonds between the metal and the ligand. And the coordination sphere is the conjunction of the two things, the central atom and the ligands group. The coordination number of a metal depending on the metal itself and on the size of this metal and the size of the ligands that are going to be bonded, and the type of interaction between the central atom and the ligand. And on the other side, the ligands can be classified in depending on its electronegative or electropositive, in nucleophilic or electrophilic, and they can act in the substitution reaction as nucleophilic or as living group, respectively. There are two main mechanisms of transformation of the complexes in solution. Is by addition, which is required is the coordination sphere to be incomplete for allowing the acceptation of an additional ligand, or the substitution. The substitution could be differentiated in three types. If there is an intermediate with a lower coordination number, we are talking about dissociative mechanisms. If the intermediate has a higher coordination number, is an associative intermediate, and if there is no relatively stable intermediary, there is a reaction of interchange. This type of mechanisms can be modified by changing the type of ligand. For example, if we use a ligand with a higher site, a bigger ligand, he's going to change the associative mechanism to a dissociative mechanism. Don't worry about this type of slide, because there are only 3 or 4 for describing the main species that are formed in solution. When we solve a salt in water, the ions are going to be solvated by water molecules directly, and depending on the conditions and the nature of the metal, it's going to be formed different ligands by giving protons or accepting protons from the media, forming hydroxo or oxo ligands, and it's this type of ligands which are going to be involved in the reaction to form the Soldier process, to take account in the Soldier process. The condensation reaction can be described as the reaction between two metallic centers, in which if one ligand of the first metallic center is going to substitute a ligand in the second metallic center, is going a reaction of substitution. And if it's not an exit of the second ligand, we are talking about addition mechanism. Depending on the nature of the ligand that is involved in this reaction, we can divide in olation or oxalation, depending if it is going to establish a union between the direct oxygen union between the two metallic centers. And the particle size and the morphology will be affected by the presence of the counter ions from the salts, but in a lower extension. As I said before, the other main family of precursors are the alkosides, and I'm going to start to describe the alkosides of the metals different from silicon, because the reactivity is completely different. The main difference between these alkosides of transition metals with the silicon ones is that thanks to its lower electronegativity, they are going to be more reactive in hydrolysis and condensation reactions. These metals, they can also have several coordination states, and this allows the coordination expansion. As this high reactivity that they have, it's necessary to process this alkoside with stricter controls or conditions, for example, the humidity. And it is much more difficult, the hydrolysis and condensation study of the kinetic study, because of this high reactivity. The hydrolysis and condensation mechanisms are shown in this slide, and it's only the reaction between the water molecule and the alkoside, displacing the alkoxide group and forming an hydroxyl bond with the metallic center, in the case of the hydrolysis. And if its reaction is directly with the formation of an alcohol group leaving the strata, this is called alkoxylation. Depending on the type of ligand, on the type of metallic center and the condition, they can be formed different oligomers, and this type of structures will determine the behavior during the Soldier process to form the final product in the solution. They can be used different catalysts to modify this reactivity in solution. The main are the use of acidic or basic conditions. And for example, in the case of use of working in acid media, we are going to improve the quality of the living group. And by using a basic catalyst, we are going to improve the nucleophile of the attacking group. And the strata will be determined for this type of catalyst, which will affect the hydrolysis, oxidation, alkylation, and different reactions that is going to take place. But as I said before, it's difficult to study to control this reaction because of the high rate. So it's because of that, normally it's used the chemical modification for reducing these hydrolysis and condensation rates and allowing the control of the final structure. One typical chemical modification is the addition of a polydentate ligand, because it's going to form a more stable complex against the reaction against the hydrolysis and condensation reaction. The most stability of this complex is due because the formation of this kind of complex is going to be favorably from an energetic point of view. In the particular case of the silicates, as I said, the lower hydrolysis and condensation rate allows the more deep study of this kind of reactions, but its behavior is completely different to the behavior of the organic polymers in solution. It starts with the polymerization of the monomer to form small particles, and after that, these particles are going to grow until they start to link in the particles to form chains. These conditions, the changing in the condition of pH, the presence of salts, of the temperature, will allow us to control this type of the final product as to obtain the desired product. Concerning the silicon alkoxides, the most typical precursors are the tetraethyl orthosilicate and tetramethyl orthosilicate, TIOS and TIMOS respectively, but they are gaining a lot of importance, the organoalkoxysilanes, as precursors for the obtention of the hybrid organic inorganic materials. As in the case of the transition metal complexes, the reaction mechanisms are the same with hydrolysis and condensation, but in this case, the condensation starts before the hydrolysis is completed. So the alcohol acts not only as a solvent, because it has influence in the final structure of the product. And it's also important to control the water-silicon ratio in order to control the final product properties. For example, if it's use acid catalyst and low ratio water silicon, you are going to obtain a weakly branched polymeric salts, and in the opposite way, we are going to obtain highly condensed particulate salts. Now I'm going to describe the main stage that takes place during the Soldier process. Once we have particles in solution, these are going to be submitted to different forces, the van der Waals forces or attractive, and the electrostatic forces or repulsive. And if we plot the global energy involved with these forces against the particle separation, we are going to find a plot with this shape, and an energy barrier is identified. This means that the particles are going to be in a stable suspension, even that the particle separation, even if the energy barrier is high enough to avoid the the particle contact. This energy barrier can be modified by controlling the solution condition. For example, in the case of changing the pH, we are going to change the surface charge of the particles, and in this way we are going to increase or diminish this energy barrier. In any case, sometimes it's necessary to use steric barriers to avoid the particles flocculation. And these steric barriers must accompany several characteristics. The surface of the particle must be completely covered. And this polymer must be firmly anchored to the surface to avoid the attachment of the polymer if it happens a collision, for example. The layer must be thick enough to allow the separation of the particles, and the non-anchored portion of the polymer solvate must be well solvated by the liquid. Generally, they are used the two approaches for obtaining the suspension stability. I mean the electrostatic stabilization and the steric stabilization, and it's named electrostatic stabilization. In this case, it's important to know that it's also useful because it's going to make easy the redispersion of the particles, because even if the suspension has flocculated, as the steric barrier avoid the direct contact between the particles, it's going to be more easy to separate the particles again. As Professor Baldi has shown previously, the precursors in solution is a very, very suitable method for obtaining nanoparticles. And for example, as Lamer-Dinigat theory showed, for example, when you start with a precursor in solution, as well as the concentration is increased, it's going to reach a maximum concentration or saturation concentration, in which it's going to start the nucleation of the particles. After that, the concentration is going to decrease until equilibrium concentration is reached. They can be distinguished three parts in this process. The first one is the pre-nucleation step in which there is no particles in solution, the nucleation, when it starts to nucleate the particles, and the growth of the particles. For obtaining homogeneous particles in size and shape, it's necessary to separate the nucleation and growth process. And for example, this can be got by the heterogeneous nucleation. In the heterogeneous nucleation, the solution is hit with foreign particles below the critical supersaturation in order to promote the nucleation of the precursors on the surface of these particles. Obviously, it's obtaining a complete separation between nucleation and growth, and this is an ideal route for the obtention of the nanocomposite powders. This is the synthesis method that in NanoCare project has been usually called as a colloidal processing route. And in these processing methods, at the beginning, the particle surface is covered with an amorphous phase, and depending in the compatibility between the particle and the second phase, we can have two situations. If they are solid state compatible, we are going to obtain finally a nanoparticle with the original particle with nanoparticles growing on its surface, and this second phase nanoparticles are obtained directly from the precursor. In the case that the solid state is incompatible, we are going to have particles with the same morphology, but the second phase is the result of the reaction between the solid particle and the precursor. From the molecular point of view, in the surface of in this case, the alumina particle, there are hydroxyl groups, and the pair electrons of the oxygen of these groups is going to attack the metallic center of the precursor in solution, substituting an alkoxide group. And for being successful, this process is necessary to take into account three features. It's necessary that the solid particles suspension must be well stabilized in order to avoid the presence of agglomerates, because if not, you are going to cover the agglomerate and not the particle itself. It's necessary also to control the surface reactivity of this particle by adjusting for example, the pH conditions. And it's necessary to choose the suitable solvent and precursor for promoting this type of reaction. Well, if we are not interested in obtaining the particles from this method, we are going to continue the process until the gel is formed. Then the particles concentration in the solution is going to increase. It is going to start the establishment in the interaction between these particles until that is named the spanning cluster is formed. The bonds between these particles are all of them similar, and the last bond is the only special characteristic is that it's going to lead to the formation of the spanning cluster. Obviously, the gelation time is going to depend on the type of material that is going to be prepared, and it's controlled by different aspects like the ratio of water alkoxide in the solution. But it's controlled also by the temperature, the concentration of the alkoxide, and the alkoxide group size. There are two main theories for explaining this type of this process, and the classical theory that it tried to answer the main question that of all the bonds that could form in a polymerization system, what fraction must form before an infinitely large molecule appears. For this theory, it's necessary to take two assumptions. That the first one is that the reactivity of all the functional groups on a monomer is equal. That is not completely true. And that the bonds form only between polymers. That means that no closed loops are present. Also, these two assumptions are considered. For this theory, it's important that to remark that it has a good prediction of the critical degree of reaction and the distribution of the molecular weights in the salt. But it concludes that the density should increase with the reaction progress, and this is not true. So it's necessary to go to another theory, that is the percolation theory. As Professor Moya explained yesterday, the percolations can be defined as, for example, if in this diagram we are citing randomly points, the percentage in which it is established a complete weight between through all the diagram, and it corresponds to around the 16 or 17 volume percent. In the case of gelation, there are another variety of this theory that is probably more appropriate for this process, in which all the points are placed from the beginning, and is going to establish different bonds until this continuous way is obtained. After the gelation point, the subsequent transformations are grouped in the aging process, and they can mainly distinguish the polymerization, that is the increase in the connectivity of the network by the condensation of different groups in the chains, the syneresis, which is the shrinkage of the gel network resulting in the expulsion of the liquid, and the coarsening, that is the dissolution and precipitation driven by the difference in solubility, and it's similar to the diffusion mechanism that has been explained for sintering. And finally, there are also phase transformation, as for example, microsyneresis, crystallization, or structural changes. Finally, when we try to obtain the dry product, it's necessary to eliminate the liquid for obtaining this three-dimensional solid network. Where one can think that is what is happening. Once the liquid is removed, we are going to obtain this three-dimensional structure, but this is only true in the case of the aerogels. In the case of the serogels, this structure, the final structure of the product will be determined by the initial structure, but this is not going to be exactly the same. For example, in this picture, it's possible to see the influence of the type of catalysis, and it's only in the case, as I said before, of the aerogel in which the final structure could be considered more or less the same as as the original. There are several possibilities for reducing the fracture risk during drying. And for example, is during the aging process, you can increase the gel extractor resistance by controlling this stage, or by adding chemical additives, as for example, surfactants for decreasing the interfacial energy, or by using different non-conventional drying methods, for example, the supercritic drying, in which there is no liquid vapor interface and no capillary pressure. And for example, the freeze drying. It's important to note that it does not allow the preparation of monolithic gels because of the formation of the ice, but it preserves the particle nanostructure. For example, in NanoCare project, when we were trying to obtain the YAG nanoparticles, we have found that when we perform the drying of the gel by conventional heating, we obtain agglomerate particles, but when we perform the direct lyophilization of this gel, we are going to obtain completely the agglomerated particles. And this process could be also used for example, working with nanoparticles. If you prepare a stable suspension of nanoparticles, and directly this suspension is sprayed over the liquid nitrogen, and after that it is lyophilized, you are going to obtain the agglomerated particles in comparison with normal heating drying methods. And finally, once we have obtained the dry gels, for example, in the case of the crystalline systems, they are going to be submitted to the hydration process and phase transformation. And for example, in the classical diagram of the transition aluminants, we can see as how the original structure of the amorphous aluminum hydroxide is going to determine the type of the transition aluminants that are going to be used during the heating. And finally, I'm going to give you only several real applications of this method in industrial product. For example, the thin films and coatings, that is one of the main applications of this method. And these coatings can be obtained by spin coating or deep coating, depending on the experimental procedure. And these coatings are normally obtained for optical or electronic or protective applications. In the case of the optical application, it's necessary to control the refractive index of the process. And if they are multi-layer coatings, the object is to obtain a gradient in the refractive index. Also, it's also used for passivation. As the solder processing involves low processing temperatures, it's more suitable for many applications. And concerning the difficulties of these products is that the thick coatings are very difficult to be obtained, and also that these coatings are quite brittle. Concerning the monolithic products, we can define monolithics as the bulk gels in which the smallest dimension is higher than 1 millimeter. And the potential of this method is for obtaining complex shapes, and that it can be consolidated at low temperature. This product can be used for optical application as optical fiber or lens and other optical components. And another advantage is the obtention of product near net shape. This is that it's going to lead to a process simplification, because sometimes not necessarily polishing. The main advantage, as always in the solder process, is the obtention of high purity products, and in the case that it's necessary, the obtention of gels of porous gels and low CTA glasses. Powders, as I described during the presentation, is the starting point. For example, the powders is the starting point for many polycrystalline ceramic processing, and by solder method it's possible to obtain very advanced fine ceramic powders that cannot be obtained by other methods. They can be used as catalysts, pigments, abrasive. For example, the high purity is a critical aspect for the nuclear fuels. And for example, they are also used for chromatography fillers. And the advantage is the control in the size and the shapes and the homogeneity at the molecular scale. And this powder can have also enhanced reactivity. In this picture is shown that one powder that was obtained in NanoCare project. This was the gel that was directly freeze-dried in the previously showed, but after calcination, even at a temperature as high as, I think that it was 1300 degrees, the main average particle size is around 100 nanometer. Concerning the limitations of this process is, as always, the cost of the precursors and the processing times, and also that sometimes the low yields that are obtained. They can be also obtained fibers, and this is by the work is to adjust the salt viscosity, and the possibilities is obtain fibers from preforms or by viscous gel painting. And the unidirectional freezing of gels is a solution for the catalyst supports. Advantages of these products is that they can be obtained refractory components at low temperature and more chemically durable fibers. An example is the high silicon content fibers, and it's used for refractory textiles or as reinforcement. And finally, other possible applications for this kind of products is as microfilters, ultrafilters, or membranes for reverse osmosis process or in chromatography or catalyst. Its potential is reside in the high surface area and the small pore size of these products. And their advantages against the polymeric membranes is that they can operate at higher temperature sterilization, and they don't shrink or swell in contact with liquids. And they have much more abrasion resistance. And it's all.